Welcome everyone to Getting Literal with the Bible. I'm, of course, Marty Parker, your host, and today
We're going to be speaking with Pastor Jay Grimwood, who has quite a lot of experience in many areas. And so we're going to pick his brain about the book of John, the Gospel of John.
Welcome to Getting Literal with the Bible, your premier source for biblically proportioned Bible interviews.
Pastor Jay, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be here with you guys. And it's an honor and privilege. Anytime you get to share, the Word of God in any form, it's always a blessing. I've been a pastor on staff at a large church here in Kansas City for 25 years. And then at the end of 2021, I retired from the staff there after I had a long tenure of working in several different areas. I started out as a children's pastor for 8 years, and then I was a discipleship and a hospitality pastor. Then I was the area I felt really had prepared me for mostly was the international missions pastor. And I had worked prior to my working for the church. I'd worked for a South Korean company and traveled extensively all over East Asia. Post that, I started traveling often to the Middle East, and so with all my international travel, they asked me to take over the international missions function of the church, which was large. It kept me traveling quite a bit, but it was not without a lot of blessings and just a lot of connectivity with people that are on the ground. Most of the people I worked with are all nationals in those countries, and we strive to go in and be part of that culture and allow God to do His work in the context of how those people are living. Contextualize Christ in their environment. So it's been a wild ride. But I'm still, staying connected as God leads me.
There is so much to go into there. Viewers, you probably don't know this yet. I also have a missions degree. And so speaking with Jay over the years has been really an amazing and encouraging time, and got to listen and sit under some of his teaching as well, which was really world class in my opinion. So it's really wonderful to have him here today. And I wish we could go into that vein a lot more. But today we're going to deal with the Gospel of John. Viewers, just remember, we're trying to bring about that biblical literacy and life change. We're trying to help people understand how you can have, or others, or many others can have, a transformed life through an interaction with God through His Word. And so people, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Pray for the channel. That's even more important. And give it out to people. Share it with people so that they can have an experience, a touch point with who Jesus is through His Word. What would you say is the primary theme of the Gospel of John?
I think the Gospel of John is so instrumental, so foundational in the delivery and how the presentation of Christ is so obviously Him as Messiah, Him as the Son of God, Him as God manifest in the flesh on earth, as a visible presentation of God the Father. And you don't see that as much in the other Gospels.
Why?
Each Gospel presents Jesus in a little bit different way. Matthew presents Jesus as the King. The genealogy that you're right when you get into that book, you're reading the genealogy, which traces you back through King David. And so and you see the phrase "Kingdom of Heaven" in the book of Matthew, or the Gospel of Matthew, over and over, some 35, 40 times. It's just all over the book. And then you don't see that phrase after that.
Incredible.
And then you see Mark, the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus is presented as a servant. And there's those great passages like Mark 10, where if we are to be a leader or a chief amongst others, we have to first be a servant. There's so much discord on just examples of Christ serving and healing, being a servant to the people that he came to minister to. And there's no genealogy there. The genealogy of a servant, there's no servants don't have history. You know what I'm saying? They're just there, and they're being used to be servants. So the focus is not on what they're doing, but how they're ministering to others through their servanthood. And it kind of reminds me of the PBS series that Lewis Gates does, where he finds people's history, through their lineage, and the DNA and all of that goes back, and it's so difficult if those people that he's trying to find a history on are in that servant category, like often are in any culture, in any ethnicity, you have that. Then you see the Gospel of Luke being Jesus presented as the Son of Man, and that phrase is seen in almost every chapter, and that's where his humanity really comes out in that gospel, where you see the only account of Jesus as a child shows up in Luke. And so you see that him growing, and increasing in wisdom and stature, and teaching basically the learned in the temple. Here's God as a child. It's like just an amazing viewpoint of him. Actually, what's interesting too about Luke is the genealogy there traces him all the way back down.
Extraordinary.
And then now you move on to the Gospel of John, and where Jesus is presented as the Son of God throughout this entire gospel. And of course, there's no genealogy there either, because God has always been. You can't trace pre-God. He's there. He's the I am, and he's always been the self-existent one.
Do you see any other things that cause the Gospel of John to stick out?
There's been this ongoing kind of argument that you'll run into occasionally, where people say that Jesus never claimed that he was God, and yet in the Gospel of John, over and over, you see that he does claim to be God, and in very distinct ways and manners. And you see what the way the book unfolds is there's 4 different Passovers that are mentioned or that are like milestones in the book of John. And these Passovers are him obviously coming to Jerusalem, and they basically bookend kind of his ministry on earth. And through each of those, he is laying out himself. He's revealing himself really as God on earth, and he does it, in a very distinct way, to where he's laying out in chapter 4, where he sees the Samaritan woman comes to the well, and he's just talking to her, and he's basically giving her life history, because he's God and knows it. And she's like, "Oh, I perceive that you're a prophet," and which was not hard to perceive after he gives you the history of your life without you ever saying anything. But so she's talking about how, well, I know that Messiah is going to come, and he's going to, worship, we're going to worship him and listen to him and follow him, whatever he tells us to do. And then Jesus says, "Hey, that person you're talking about, I am he. It is me." And so he obviously is revealing himself openly, but another thing that you see throughout the book of John is the Pharisees continually, and those religious lawyers and the scribes and the Pharisees continually trying to trap him, continually trying to make him twist his words and literally to try to kill him. So there's this spiritual warfare battle going on there between the spirit of Antichrist and the spirit of, and it's an ongoing battle.
Let's roost on that for a moment.
Of course, he was revealing himself equally to the disciples too, to his family, to all of those people that would come into contact with him. His family were I think offended in a little bit, because when he basically said, "Hey, these are my family. Whoever does the will of God, and whoever is listening, to my words and obeying my words, those are my brothers and my sisters."
Striking.
Another way that God lays, or that Jesus as the Lord begins to lay out this fact that he is indeed God on earth, is there's a series of him presenting himself as the I am. And there's a series of 7 I ams that he says. And of course we know that the I am of Exodus chapter 3, which is where God was speaking to Moses, and Moses asked God, who should I tell them is sending me, to the Israel to free them? And he just says, "I am who I am." Tell him who I am. I'm the self-existing one. I'm Yahweh. I'm Jehovah. And he gives them this command of and tells them, "I am." And then Jesus turns around, and the Pharisees are questioning him, and the argument is about Abraham. Are they sons of Abraham or not? Basically gives them that truth that no, before Abraham was, I am. And they knew he did that on purpose, because he wanted them to see that this isn't just about me right here in this existence. This is about prophecy being fulfilled from the beginning of time. And now I'm here, but before Abraham was, I am. I am the I am, is what he's saying. And that's why they picked up stones. They were going to kill him, immediately, for making himself equal to God. And then you have these I ams throughout the book. In each of those instances, he reveals himself as God.
What other ideas do you have about that?
Well, for me, like, I would travel a lot, so I would always be sitting next to somebody in the airplane, and we'd get into discussions, and more often than not, when I'd see skeptics, when I'd sit next to a skeptic, that was what the skepticism always went to, was Jesus wasn't really God. Good person. No, you can't really argue with the fact that Jesus is not a good person. It's like, he emulates everything we need to be. But you can argue whether or not he was God. And most of the time those kind of discussions would drift back to, well, he never really said that, And then, I would go back, and talk about some of these things, like, I am the good shepherd. And, he says in John chapter 10, I'm this shepherd. Nobody can pluck my sheep out of their, my hands. Meaning I'm taking care of my sheepfold. One of the I ams is, I am the door, the door to the sheepfold. But then in that passage in 10, he says just straight out, I and my Father are one. And that Greek word there is the same. It means literally the same. So what he's saying is, he gets through all his discourse, and you can't really argue with that. You can't say, no, that's not what he meant.
Jay, what did you feel when you first experienced that I am in the Gospel of John?
when I would read through the book of John and I would see those statements made, it was like, okay, I just need to tuck these away for later use. It's like I need to like hang on to these as promises, as hope that there's something different about Jesus, that he is a good prophet. He is a good man. He's all God and man together, but he is God manifest.
Okay, let's explore that one.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And this whole in John chapter 17 in the Gospel of John, Jesus has that prayer that names all of us. I'm not only praying for these that you gave to me, but those that believe on you through their testimony. And that's generational. So Jesus literally prays for us in John 17. Through that, we can know that we're set apart. The Word in John 17:17 it says, my word is truth, and sanctify them through the Word, for that Word is truth. Set them apart through the book, through the Word. And in John chapter 6, where he is the bread of life. I am the bread of life. Now that's that discourse that he has about, if you eat my blood, flesh, and drink my blood. Well, they didn't get it. They was like, oh, this is too hard. This is cannibalistic, teaching, and people will look at that. Well, if you just read the Bible, if you go on down a little bit farther down, he says, my words are spirit and life. So what he's saying is when you meditate on the Word, those words are the spirit and the life that give you the bread of life that you need. The context of that, those kind of references of Jesus, to the Father, literally almost the entire book of John is him talking about the Father and him and how they are one. And it's just a different, amazing book,
Continue your scriptural journey and tune in next time for part 2. Viewers, thank you so much for stopping by and getting literal with the Bible. Don't forget, Stairway Division is a not-for-profit. It is our vision to promote a wise and compassionate paradigm for sharing Jesus Christ with others. This is the reason we do everything that we do. If you would like to help in this project, stop by www.stairwaydivision.org/partners. Any help from you would be much appreciated. Don't forget that our videos drop every Friday, and if you know anybody that this particular video would resonate with, feel free to share it with them. Also, please remember to pray for the success of the channel. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.
It's hard to pick a favorite book in the Bible because they're all so great in their unique way.